Hi everyone, and welcome to How Not to Burn Toast number 2. This topic is just freeze it. So we're going to be talking all about freezing food and reheating food and thawing food, all of that kind of fun stuff that has to do with your freezer. We found that during the pandemic, it was something that people were searching a lot for because you were buying in bulk while there were still products in the store. So we figured we should touch on this topic to go with our pandemic pantry.
But also freezing food in regular times, like not during a pandemic, is helpful too, because maybe you'll find some foods on sale and you can stock up your freezer to get ready for maybe the next couple of weeks that you're cooking, and so on and so forth.
And holidays. It comes in really handy during the holidays, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on when we talk about freezing prepared foods.
Yeah.
So we're not doing the webinar format anymore because we had a lot of trouble with it, and this like YouTube video kind of thing gives us the flexibility to do a little bit more content, edit it, so that we can show you recipes and things like that. So that's why we've done it like this, but you can still ask us questions. I watch Futurama. If you watch Futurama, you know why I said ask. And Kaylee will tell you how you can ask us questions.
So to ask us questions, you can either leave some questions down below in this YouTube video on our Boulder City Library YouTube page. Also, you can give us a like and subscribe if you want to see more content from us. There are a whole bunch of story times and things from the youth program on our YouTube page right now, but we're working hard to try and put up some more adult content, especially like cooking content. But also, if you have questions, you can interact with us on our Instagram page or our Facebook page. We're frequently checking that to see if anyone's messaging us, and we would love to hear from you.
Yep, so ask us questions. If there are any topics you'd like to see, please, chime in with those. We're always trying to come up with topics for different things. Next month we'll be doing can, how to can. Fall is the canning season, so that will be our next step. But we're going to talk about frozen food today.
Yep.
And I believe frozen food always has a bad connotation with it, especially because I think most of us think of either
like TV dinners,
right,
or freezer meals,
meals,
single ladies eating the
healthy choice
lifestyle.
But freezer foods are actually really good. In fact, things like vegetables that you buy are normally frozen right after picking, so a lot of times they are better than the fresh stuff that you're getting in the store that has come on a truck. Yeah. So I actually grew up in an area where they froze a lot of food because we grew up in farming country and hunting country and all of that kind of fun stuff. However, my parents filled our freezer with Schwann's food. So I was used to eating frozen meals. But when I got out on my own, I realized I could freeze my own food, and it's cheaper and more economical, especially if you're single, because buying one thing of like hamburger costs like $8 when you can buy a whole 3-pound package for $6. So a lot of times it's just economical, and it's a time saver too. You can make things ahead of time and then go on and thaw them. Like I said, great around the holidays, great if you're like me and you're single and you cook for 6 million people and you have a lot of leftovers. So I highly recommend trying freezing, and we're going to go over how to do it. So the big question, Kaylee, what can I freeze?
A lot of stuff.
If you can't tell, I'm the one that does all the freezer stuff. So I have my freezer in my. Most of us just have that freezer. Mine's a drawer freezer in my
Sam has a fancy
fridge, and then a lot of you have the one that's up top, and they're pretty tiny. So it makes it kind of hard to freeze a lot of food. I went out and bought a freezer, a full-size freezer.
Well, for your garage?
It's in my house.
Oh, okay.
Because freezers around here, a lot of us put them in our garage, and that's fine if you have a place that's insulated and doesn't change temperature a lot. My garage is 100 right now.
Yeah.
So it's really hard on a freezer, so I keep mine actually in my kitchen, so I look like I have 2 fridges, which is kind of cool.
That's pretty good.
So what foods can we put in that freezer? You can put meat, vegetables, you can put, dairy. Kaylee freezes bread. I've never froze bread before, so I was like, oh, you can freeze bread?
But she did bring up when we were talking about this the other day, she brought up that sometimes she doesn't like to freeze bread because it gets a little bit softer once it comes out of the freezer, but also Austin and I, my fiance, we mostly toast all of our kind of bread concoctions that we put in the freezer, so we like to get bagels in stock when they're on sale. We buy bread in bulk from Costco so because we only go like once a month or every 3 weeks or something like that, just to make sure that we have things on hand. And I am one of those people that has just one of those regular standard freezer at the top of my fridge. So I don't keep as many things as Sam, but we definitely try to shop for sales and buy meat in bulk and freeze it in like individual, like 1 meal packages, so it's easy to defrost, easy to cook, easy to just pull out when you're hungry. And we'll talk about like some defrosting, freezing things today too.
Right. So we're gonna attach this to our website so you can look at it. There are a bunch of freezer guides out there, and they're really good to use. They'll tell you what kind of things that you can freeze, how long, how to cook them. Vegetables and fruits are one of the bigger ones. I think a lot of people like to freeze because around here it's really hard to get really good produce, which sounds really weird because we're really close to California, but because we have to get everything shipped in, things are either underripe or overripe.
Yeah.
So when you get strawberries in season, like strawberry season is what, May, June, you want to freeze them so that you have them all year round.
Mm-hmm.
For things like strawberries and raspberries, it's super simple because all you have to do is prepare them, wash them, and you stick them in your freezer on a sheet tray until they get hard. And then you put them in a handy dandy freezer bag.
Yeah.
It's super simple for a lot of fruits. Other fruits you'll need to add syrups and stuff too, but for the most part, you can just wash them, freeze them, and then bag them so that they're safe. And then Kaylee uses them in things like smoothies.
Yes. When I used to live by myself, I used to prep smoothies. So when I had lots more freezer room because I was only cooking for one person, I used to take just like not this size of Ziploc bag, but the standard kind of quart size, the quart size freezer bag, and I would stuff them full of everything that it would take to make a smoothie instead of the milk, like sans the milk, no milk inside of the bag. But so I would put like a cup of fruit, maybe some rolled oats, a couple handfuls of spinach, and half a banana if I had some bananas that were starting to go bad. Usually I did this when I had bananas that were starting to go bad. But then just to prep little smoothie packets, because then all you have to do is dump the whole thing into your blender. Everything's all cold and nice and kind of crystallized from the freezer. And then you just add a cup or 2 of milk and then you blend it up and you have a smoothie that's all ready to go.
Yay!
Yeah.
Super easy for the mornings, when you're half awake and you're trying to, get on the go, especially if you have one of those little personal blenders. Vegetables can be a little bit tougher because you have to blanch them first. So that basically means boiling water, in the boiling water for like a minute, and then into a cold bath. So that they stop cooking. So you like flash cook them. And that's what they do when they freeze your vegetables and you just buy them in a package. So a lot of times I just buy them when they're on sale and keep them in my house. But if you want to do your own, you can. But the big one for me is meat. So meat is very expensive. Very expensive. Especially when you only need it for like 1 or 2 people, because you're looking at a package that will feed like an army and going, how am I going to use this in a week or in 4 days, which is what normally you're supposed to use it in. So that's where freezing comes in handy. You can also, a lot of times around here, I buy meat from the Las Vegas Food Co-op. every once in a while, and they get it from a rancher in Utah. And they come in frozen in prepackaged portions, which are really nice. But freezing meat is actually super simple. You can do it a couple of different ways. My advice is to package it in the size you need.
Yeah.
Normally 1 pound-ish. If you're single like me and you buy giant steaks, you can cut them in half so that they're just, normal size instead of trying to eat an 18-ounce steak.
Or also, I might mention Costco a lot, but you don't have to have a Costco membership to be able to buy meats in bulks because, Albertsons, Vons, Smith's, Walmart, they all sell meat in big packages. But frequently I buy the big packages of turkey or the big packages of 8 chicken breasts, and it's really easy to just pull out 1 or 2 and put them in their own the quart size freezer bag. So that if you think okay, so I'll probably use 2 chicken breasts per recipe that I make or something like that, you can put those in their own little baggies. Or you can food save them, which we'll demonstrate later.
Yeah.
Or you, and then so you make those into kind of meal-sized portions so that they're easier to defrost and also really handy to just pull out of the freezer. But especially if you buy hamburger in bulk or ground turkey in bulk or something like that, you definitely want to kind of divide that up. And you don't have to have a kitchen scale if you don't have one at home, but to think about, okay, so maybe this is 5 pounds of hamburger, I'll split it into 5 different portions, or if you only use half a pound every time you cook, 10 different portions to maybe help make your meals stretch too. But it's really easy and simple, and it doesn't take too much time once you get home from the grocery store, but it's pretty good.
Yep. So we'll kind of talk about the different kind of ways, since you talked about the food saver, that you can save food, freeze food. So there are a bunch of different tools and products to freeze food, and I have a lot of them. So I brought some of them in. You have your saran wrap. This is actually freezer wrap, so it's a little actually hardier than regular saran wrap, a little bit thicker.
Oh yeah.
Though if you get the Costco big thing of saran wrap, it's normally pretty heavy duty.
Yeah.
And I actually use these kind of cling wraps in conjunction with freezer bags when I'm doing meats, because the enemy of freezer food is freezer burn. And freezer burn is when oxygen gets to the food that's in the packaging, and it literally burns it, kind of like I burned myself the other day. It doesn't make the food bad. You can cut those portions off and still use the food unless it's too much of it.
Yeah.
It just kind of changes the texture and the taste, and it's yucky.
Yeah.
But wrapping the chicken breast in saran wrap first will prevent oxygen from getting to it. And then you can put them in your zip top bags.
Yeah, and it can also help them store for longer amounts of time too. So, generally, if I buy 1 pack of chicken and freeze it, that's probably going to be gone within a month or so. But you can freeze meats for up to a year and a half.
Yeah.
And after that, they don't go bad, but they start to lose nutrients and flavor.
Yeah. And
so
they do change in texture a little bit.
Yeah.
I've eaten stuff that's been more than a year old and it's fine. But you'll see the charts will tell you how long you should do it. I actually say you can go a lot longer if your freezer is kept at 0, so it doesn't thaw or anything. So if you've had a power failure, your food's going to be probably compromised a little. But for the most part around here, we don't have power failures.
Yeah.
So it's not as big of a deal. Just make sure that your freezer stays shut.
Yeah, but definitely when it comes to seeing how long something can be frozen, or even this smaller guide has how long things can stay in the fridge, which I thought was really helpful.
Yes.
I never really
Super
learned
helpful.
that. I just kind of go by ear. But they both have really good ideas about how long to freeze something, but also how to prepare to freeze them as well, which I found really helpful.
Yeah, we could tell you how to do all this, and the video would be 5 hours long.
Yeah.
Or you can read.
Yes.
And have these handy dandy charts. So Ziploc bags are what most people use. Ziploc, Ziploc is it's another one of those
Kleenex
kind of crayon things. So this is a gallon size. You don't want to use storage bags. Some people make that mistake. Storage bags aren't as hardy, so your things will likely get freezer burn in there if you use them. And you'll notice these have handy dandy little like areas.
Yep.
One of the things you really need to do that I am guilty of not doing is write what this is and what date you put it in. Because then you know what to use first. You know, if you're cleaning out your freezer, oh my God, that's been in there for 3 years. Kind of thing. And you know what it is, because once you freeze some meats, they all start to kind of look alike. And you're like, is this pork or is this beef? It especially happens if you buy straight from the ranchers, because their pork is like as red as most beef. Really tasty, let me tell you. But right on here, handy, very handy. Something I do not do. You can just use this.
A permanent marker. But I've also found too that sometimes if you're putting cold food into the bags, which you should be putting cold food into the bags before you put it into the freezer, that sometimes it gets a little hard to write on the plastic once it's cold. So I like to write on the bags before I start to fill them too. And even if you don't have if you have off-brand bags that don't have this white part on it, you can still write directly onto the clear plastic and it works just fine.
And there's special tapes and stuff and labels you can buy for that kind of stuff. You really don't need to. You just need a permanent marker.
I just need a good permanent marker. This one is a clip top. That's fancy.
I've also used when I was freezing. So one of the things you'll hear fights back and forth on is dairy. Can I freeze dairy, like milk and cream and half and half? Yes, you can. It doesn't work as well for half and half because the fat kind of separates from the whey. And then for heavy cream, so things with higher fat content in them, they'll also kind of curdle a little bit, but in baking and things like that, that's fine. And what I did was I used containers like this. This is a deli container that is made for the microwave, for the dishwasher, and for the freezer. And I portioned them out into, this is 8 ounces, so it's a cup. And then I wrote in different colors. So by a glance, I could tell if it was half and half, or heavy cream, or just regular milk. And that was really handy at the beginning, when everything seemed to be disappearing from the thing. Or if you're like me, and I have trouble with dairy, but I use it in baking and stuff a lot. So you buy a whole half gallon of milk and you never use it, freeze it. That way you don't waste it, which I'm very guilty of doing.
So I have a question. So oftentimes, if you're just making a recipe that needs 1 cup of milk or something like that, you'll just pull it out of the freezer, and then when you put it in your recipe, it's all just fine.
It's all just fine normally. If you're using heavy cream and you want to whip it again, it won't whip as well. But if you're putting it in a bread recipe or cookie recipe, something that it's getting mixed into, it really works just fine. My family used to buy gallons of milk and put the gallon in the freezer. Not smart, they do explode. You can do it, but they need, when you're putting in foods like in this, you'll notice there's a line and then there's a lip. So you'll want to fill it to the line, because most foods, when they freeze, expand because they create ice crystals inside of them. So you need what's called headspace. We'll talk about that in canning too, because otherwise you have explosions. And believe me, you don't want to try to clean frozen milk out of a freezer, because you have to take everything out of the freezer, thaw the freezer, and then you have smelly milk.
Speaking of explosions and dairy, another thing that is not good to freeze is eggs in the shell.
So another thing I did a lot of, and I forgot to bring them, is I froze eggs during this pandemic. So I would buy a bunch of eggs and then put them into like little cups like this and stir them up and put them in ice cube trays. So 1 egg per ice cube tray. And that way you can thaw them and you can use them in baking, scrambled eggs, things like that. Can't use just like, can't make like a fried egg with them anymore.
Yeah.
But you can use them if you're mixing something up.
And Sam mentioned to me when we were talking about freezing eggs that you want to scramble the eggs before you freeze them if you're freezing them raw, because the freezer will change the texture of the yolks and make them odd.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to scramble them.
Whites freeze really well. So if you're using a recipe that has a bunch of egg yolks and you're like, oh my god, I have a bunch of whites left, just freeze the whites. And then you can make like an egg white omelet or something like that.
And they can be so fancy. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my god.
You won't be able to make a meringue with them, but you can use them in other things.
Yeah.
And then this fancy thing right here. I hope you can see it. So this is a vacuum sealer, a home one. If you've watched like Food Network, you've probably seen the really fancy ones that blow air in and then suck them out. These don't do this. They just suck the air out of bags and basically shrink wrap them, I guess would be the best way to say it. So you take a bag, and this one is one of the fancier ones, and it keeps the bags right in there, and you cut off the amount you need, and then you stick it in here. It makes a lot of really loud noises and sucks the air out. This one has an attachment, so you can use their pre-made bags. You can also use a marinator and a canning thing with it. I've never actually used those because they're kind of expensive. But I've had this one for probably about 5 years now. They're pretty heavy duty, and I do recommend them if you're going to be freezing a lot of meat.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, trying to freeze or trying to cling wrap like 30 pounds of meat is a pain in the butt. But just being able to cut off the bag and stick it in here, and it sucks the air out and it seals it, and then you can write on it, is the easiest thing in the world. So if you're going to do a lot of freezing, I highly recommend this. It will do moist foods not that well. So if your food has a marinade in it, it's a little iffy on doing it, but the newer ones might be able to. So the technology might have changed. But these have been around for a while, but they were really popular a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I use mine constantly when I'm buying big fancy foods.
Lots of meats.
Lots of meat.
Mm-hmm.
But for other things, soft things, it doesn't work as well because you might squish it.
So we talked a lot about meats, and we briefly touched on fruits and vegetables.
Right.
And now we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about prepared meals as well. So I am a lover of Pinterest, and I've gotten into Pinterest kicks where it's been like, prep your own meals and keep them in the freezer so that you can dump them into a crock pot. And I think a lot of things like that are really helpful. Like if you find a recipe, like a crock pot recipe, that you can stick all the ingredients in the freezer so that all you have to do maybe in the morning before you go to work is take out your freezer bag and dump everything in your crock pot and set it on low, and then go to work for 8 hours and come home and you have a beautiful meal waiting for you. And I highly recommend those if you want to peruse and look yourself. But there's also different ideas about like maybe making some casseroles to prep for the freezer. Maybe especially during the holiday season too, that might be helpful because then if you have unexpected company, you can just pop a casserole out of the freezer, bake it for an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, and then you have fresh food for everyone that showed up at your house.
And you look like you spent all this time making this fancy lasagna, but really you made it 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I freeze a lot of prepared foods during the holidays. Cookies. Cookie dough freezes amazingly.
Yes.
Chocolate chip cookies, man, you make a big giant, 4 dozen batch, and you just use like an ice cream scoop, get them out on a tray, stick them in your freezer until they're hard, and throw them in a bag.
Even like
Label.
I've before like maybe made like a batch of cookie dough, cooked half of it because I didn't
Right.
want to wash my pan. I only have one baking sheet at home. I didn't want to wash my pan and make more cookies, so I just put the rest in the freezer. It's okay for you to put it in the freezer, and then sometimes I'll just put it in my fridge to make it a little softer, and then you can roll out your cookies after that too. But I did find when I was living with my parents that if I would put the cookie dough in the freezer, sometimes it would disappear. So maybe if you have family members that are fine with eggs and cookie dough, be careful about the cookie dough you put in your freezer.
Right, right. And it, I mean, because the holidays get really, really hectic. So having, like, making them before the holidays is a really good idea. Things like mashed potatoes and stuff like that also freeze really well. And you're like, really? Yes, they freeze really well. In fact, I'll make big batches of them and put them in these little containers. So I have them when, you know, I make a steak or something like that. I just pull one out, nuke it, and sometimes you have to add a little bit of
Like
liquid
butter, or
cream.
something, yeah.
But otherwise, they're absolutely fine. So it's a good make-ahead thing because mashed potatoes seem to be the one that takes forever at Thanksgiving. And makes a mess because you gotta peel all the potatoes and you gotta mash them.
It's a labor of love, but
Right.
you can do that labor before your
Right.
dinner party.
Right. You know, your stuffings, things like that, they all freeze really well. So make them ahead of time, and you just have to remember to thaw them before, or give yourself enough time to cook all of them. But one thing I do a lot of is I freeze leftovers. So like I said, I'm from the Midwest. So when you cook for the whole farming community. And even though I've lived alone for a really long time, I still do that. Because most recipes cook for, what, 4 to 6 people? So I end up with a lot of leftovers, which is why I invest in these. Because they're really heavy duty, but they're good for like single servings, or you can get bigger ones for double servings and stuff. And I put lots of foods in there. Right now in my freezer, there is rice, because you can freeze rice. You can freeze stews. So I have the Japanese curry we made last time that didn't finish, is in my freezer right now, in a container like this. I have soups in there. I have chilies. All of that stuff freezes wonderfully, and it's great for when, you know, you've had a really long day at work. Especially right now, everything seems very long.
And especially now that hopefully in the next few weeks we'll start like dropping down into the 80s.
Right.
While we start to get our fall coming.
Right. Sorry, we had to switch cameras.
So where do you get your Tupperwares from, Sam?
Amazon.
Amazon, and we can leave a link down to Sam's favorite Tupperwares from Amazon down below too.
Yeah, so I buy these because they're pre-portioned, and I have a tendency to eat like a Midwesterner, so it's really good if you're trying to diet. But they're also good because they're inexpensive, so if you want to hand them off to someone, you don't feel bad about giving them your fancy Tupperware. Which I remember being a big thing from when I was little. So the next thing we're going to kind of talk about is thawing.
Yes.
Or as my mom used to call it, de-thawing, which is freezing, so I never understood that one. So most of us thaw improperly. We take things out, stick them on the counter, and just let them come to temperature. No. That's actually fairly dangerous because the outside of your food heats up faster than the inside, so you have a temperature differential right there. And you end up in the danger zone.
The danger zone.
You know the temperature zone.
The danger zone is anything, let's see, it's between, you want your food to be colder than 46 degrees?
Something like
or is
that.
that above danger zone?
No, the danger zone is like, the top of the danger zone is like 140-ish.
Yeah.
And I think you're right around
So
40.
46 degrees, if something is colder than 46 degrees, you're okay. But if it goes above 46 degrees, then it is in the danger zone. And then once you get to a certain temperature, like 100 and something.
It's like 106 60 something.
That's when your meat starts cooking.
Right.
So that is the safe zone.
Or overdone.
Yes.
In a lot of cases. So boiling, of course, is safe because that kills everything, including your skin. And then frozen, which is 0 Celsius, which is 32 degrees for us, is safe.
Yes.
So if you need to thaw food, you have to give yourself time.
Yes.
So the best way to do it is in the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
And they say overnight a lot of times. I find my fridge takes a lot longer to thaw foods.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot longer than 8 hours, which is overnight. So I always, if I do remember to do it, I always take them out 2 days ahead of time. To give them time to come to temperature. And that also helps in the deformation of the ice crystals so that they're not jagged and you don't lose all the meat juices and all that kind of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is mostly just goes for meat because most other things you don't need to thaw before you cook them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other way, and the way I use most often, is a water bath.
Mm-hmm.
So you stick them in cold, you're supposed to be running water, but cold water for 30 minutes at a time. Make sure your water stays cold. And your food will thaw. It may take about an hour or so, depending, or if it's bigger, longer. Like a turkey, it takes a long time.
But if you're just throwing like a pound of hamburger or
Right.
like a couple chicken breasts, it's kind of crazy how fast
Right.
it will thaw in cold water.
Right. Don't use hot water. You'll cook your food. You'll hit the danger zone. Use cold water and make sure it stays cold. Because if it gets warm, then you're starting to flirt with the danger zone.
Yeah.
Don't put it on the counter. You can defrost using your microwave. I don't like doing that because you end up cooking like pieces that are thinner, and it's kind of gross.
Yeah, it's not the best texture.
No. So I almost always use the water bath method because it's just easy, simple, and it makes me clean my sink more often.
Yeah.
But if you do put stuff out on the counter, we're all guilty of it. Just try to remember not to do that because we don't want anyone to get sick. But most prepared foods, you don't need to thaw. So you can just pop them in the microwave. You can pop them in the oven. Follow your recipe when it says for how long. But it depends on like your oven and your microwave. My microwave is old and takes forever to heat things up. My oven is new and does not. So you'll have to kind of learn to keep an eye on things. You can kind of walk away, but at the same time, don't walk away with your oven on and forget about it. And then you make a lot of crock pot meals, right?
Yes. It's good to, it's funny because a lot of the crock pot meals I make are with frozen chicken breasts, and my friends always say like, I didn't even know that you could just put a frozen chicken breast straight into your crock pot, and it's totally fine because the slow cooker will bring it up to temperature slowly, but then also start cooking once it gets to that danger zone, but you won't be in the danger zone because it'll already be cooking once it's thawed through. And I think like if you're definitely making a soup or like shredded chicken for tacos or something like that, it still tastes just as great. And it actually shreds even better once it's been in the crock pot all day too.
Right.
And you can't even really tell that it's been frozen at all.
No, and we don't eat a lot of crock pot meals in the summer here for some reason, and you really should because it doesn't heat up your kitchen like your oven does. But yeah, the freezer, I don't do that very often. I think I'm going to start doing that now because it does sound really easy for those days you just kind of want to come home to a house that smells good.
And if you want my crock pot recipes, they're linked in our previous video of pantry staples. So go ahead and go look at those handouts that we left linked in our other video and watch the other video if you would like as well.
So, freezing food is pretty easy. Like I said, just follow a guide. We also have a lot of books about freezing meals here. But we're going to demonstrate one of my favorite things to freeze, and it's lasagna.
Yes.
A lot of times we just go and buy it, you know, buy it at Stouffer's and stuff like that. It's so easy to make, folks. Make it yourself. It tastes so much better because you can customize it to the way you like it, especially if you're dealing with people who are vegetarians and things like that. There's so many vegetables you can sneak in there on kids, and they would never know. So we're going to make lasagna roll-ups today, and it's different than making a whole lasagna because, like I said, live alone. Don't need to eat an entire lasagna like Garfield.
What?
So I make roll-ups. So you normally don't sit down when you're preparing food, but I'm really tall, so the camera cuts me off. So like I said, we're gonna make lasagna roll-ups. So with, you know, TV magic, we have everything all ready. So we made lasagna noodles. We boiled them until just before they're al dente, so like a minute or two before you would normally pull them out, because you don't want soggy lasagna noodles. Worst thing ever, soggy lasagna. So these are just regular noodles. And we cooled them down because you also don't want them really hot, because it will, 1, melt the cheese, and 2, burn you.
Yes.
So they're nice and dry and everything. So you just kind of spread them out and you make your lasagna filling. So if you have a lasagna filling that you really like, go ahead and use it. This one is from Budget Bites, which is a really good website if you are on a budget. They also have a cookbook. We have it here at the library. I recommend it. But this is a lasagna filling, and it has ricotta cheese in it, so a container of ricotta cheese. It has a cup of mozzarella, a quarter of a cup of Parmesan in it. I use Parmesan and Romano, fancy, and what else? An egg. I put in a teaspoon of garlic powder because I like my lasagna garlicky.
Yeah.
Salt, pepper, and then you'll notice there's green stuff in it. That's frozen spinach.
Yeah.
So frozen spinach is something good to keep in your kitchen because you can use it in a lot of things. And like I said, this is super customizable. You could put zucchini in it. You could put mushrooms in it. You could add artichoke hearts to this, and it'd be like spinach artichoke dip. Yeah. Or you could leave out the vegetables because you hate vegetables.
Customizable.
Customizable. I wouldn't put meat in here. Put meat in your sauce if
Yeah.
you need meat sauce. But super easy to make. I like to make it a day ahead of time to give the flavors time to meld.
Time to get to know each other.
Right. So everything's laid out. I use my hands. Okay. I have gloves on right now. I use gloves at home a lot too. But I use my hands because sticky, and your hands are your best tools. So you just take some of your filling and you spread it out over your noodle. You don't want too much because remember you're going to roll it up. You kind of press it down,
Tuck it in for a nap.
tuck it in, and then you take your noodle. I'm going to move this one so you can see it. And you roll it. Ta-da!
Beautiful.
Roll up. And you keep doing that with all of your noodles. Normally you'll get about 12 from this. And you can freeze these a couple of different ways. You'll notice I'm putting it on a sheet tray. That's because when I do mine, I get them all rolled. I stick them in the freezer for about an hour or two, and they'll freeze solid. That is why there is cling wrap on here, because if you just put them on a metal pan, they will freeze to the pan. And then once these are frozen, you just put them in your handy dandy zip top bag. You label it, you know, spinach lasagna roll-ups, date. And that way you can pull out as many as you want to put on different sauces.
Yeah.
So you could do an Alfredo sauce if you have artichokes in them, fancy. You could do your marinara. You could do a meat sauce. And then you bake them off. You can also just nuke them, which is really handy on most days too, from frozen. And then you can also freeze them in, you'll see these little like metal tins that you bake like little tiny loaves of banana bread in.
Oh yeah, just a loaf pan.
Yeah, just a little loaf pan. And you can put like 2 or 3 in there and then cover them with sauce and freeze them with the sauce. And then you just bake them in the pan. So this is a super easy recipe. You can also give them to people really easy.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like when someone's sick, you always want to give them like lasagna or just had a new baby or whatever. Lasagna.
Yeah. But this is fun too. It's definitely creative. So.
You can do so much with this, and it's really cheap. Other than ricotta is kind of expensive right now. I don't recommend any other kinds of soft cheeses. You might be able to get away with cottage cheese, but mascarpone's sweet, so don't use mascarpone. And cottage cheese is a little too watery, I think. You could mix cottage cheese in with this if you're trying to be healthier. But I would stick with the classic ricotta. But next time I think I will put artichoke hearts in there. I have frozen artichoke hearts. And I love spinach artichoke dip. So you just finish them and enjoy.
Yeah.
So that's our recipe for today. The recipe will be up on our website with my couple of modifications in them because I actually put 2 recipes from different people. One from the Pioneer Woman, one from Budget Bites together to kind of do this after a lot of trial and error. A lot of error.
Yeah, and we'll leave some links below too to the Budget Bites website as well, and some different freezing tips guides that we found.
Yeah, and we're gonna finish these off and freeze them, and we'll see you next time for How Not to Burn Toast Can, where we teach you how to do canning because it's a lot simpler than it sounds.
And I'll give you guys my great-grandma's recipe for freezer jam.
Oh, man. Oh, fancy. And I'll make some pickles.
Yes.
So we're excited about that. We are looking for other topics. We will be doing a Thanksgiving one in November to look forward to because we know a lot of you will be doing your own Thanksgivings this year.
Yeah.
So we want you to be prepared so you make the best Thanksgiving ever.
Yes.
But we hope that you liked our freezer thing. We're sorry we do a lot of talking. We're still trying to figure out our format. If you like this, let us know. If you don't like this, don't let us know. I mean,
if you have constructive criticism,
that's the word. And
don't just say, I hate you.
We'll try to get better. We'll try to get better. But if you have any questions about freezing, please let us know. We will say this, we're not experts.
No.
We're home cooks. We've learned from various sources. We do research well, though.
Yep.
So if you have any,
at the library.
So if you have any questions, we can probably point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
But don't forget about all the links and all the other cool stuff we're doing, like our cookbook club.
Our cookbook club.
Next?
This.
I can't remember. It's on the website. It's all about vegetarian cooking, though.
Yes.
Simply something. It's a really good book. I just can't remember the title. We'll probably be both making butternut squash stuff because we love butternut squash. So join us for that. That one's actually live. And Kayley has done a resume course. So if you're looking to bone up on your writing skills, this is our master. And we're hoping to get some other stuff. So if you have any ideas or things you would like to see,
even if it's not for cooking classes or formats, just tell us what kind of topics you want us to cover for our adult programs, and we'll try
do
as best
what we
as
can. But thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.
Woohoo! Oh, I'll get it if you want.